What if I told you that the vast majority of the incredible results you achieve in your life, whether at work or personally, actually come from a surprisingly small fraction of your efforts?
Hmm.
Or that most of your happiness might stem from only a sliver of the time you spend?
Yeah,
Imagine the sheer power, the incredible leverage of truly understanding where that vital few lies and how to harness it. It's a surprising notion that turns conventional wisdom completely upside down. Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we unearth profound insights from the sources you've provided, transforming what could easily be information overload into crystal clear understanding.
yeah, we're here to guide you through the intellectual landscape, pointing out the hidden gems and connecting the dots, all custom tailored for you, our listener.
And today, our mission is to take an incredibly deep dive into a concept that is profoundly influential, yet surprisingly often misunderstood.
That's right, we're talking about Richard Koch's groundbreaking book, The 80-20 Principle, The Secret of Achieving More with Less.
This book isn't just a business read, it's a philosophy, isn't it?
Absolutely. We'll trace its unexpected origins, delve into its powerful transformative applications in business, and then pivot to how it can literally reshape your personal life and even influence the very fabric of society.
That's right. Our entire deep dive today is built around this singular, powerful book. It's an absolute treasure trove of examples, practical wisdom, and some truly mind-bending insights that will challenge how you think about effort, results, and everything between.
Definitely. So let's get started.
So to kick us off, if this principle promises such a radical shift in how we see the world, how does Cove articulate the 80-20 principle at its core? What exactly is it?
Okay. At its most fundamental level, the 80-20 principle asserts that a minority of causes, inputs, or effort usually lead to a majority of the results, outputs, or rewards.
Right.
It's fundamentally about inherent imbalance, a recognition that the world isn't neatly symmetrical or perfectly linear.
It challenges our default assumption that effort and reward are directly proportional then.
Exactly. It completely upends our conventional understanding. We often intuitively expect that if we put in 100% effort, we get 100% results, or that everything is a one-to-one exchange.
Yeah, that feels right.
But the principle suggests that's simply not how it works in reality.
Okay.
Consider a literal example from the book.
Nah.
It suggests that 80% of what you achieve in your job comes from 20% of the time spent.
Wow, that implies what, 4/5 of your effort is?
Is, for all practical purposes, largely irrelevant to your core achievements.
Largely irrelevant. That's a startling thought, isn't it? That so much of what we do doesn't significantly move the needle.
It really is. It
Sure.
makes you rethink every busy day you've ever had.
It certainly does.
Yeah.
I find it helpful to visualize this. The source material uses simple visual metaphors to really drive this home.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine your total effort as a pie chart. Only a small shaded slice, about 20% of that pie, connects via an arrow to a much larger shaded portion, perhaps 80% of another pie chart representing your results.
Right. And the same applies to causes leading to consequences or inputs to outputs.
It visually hammers home that a small input area consistently leads to a disproportionately large output area. It's a really clear picture.
What's truly fascinating here is how universal this imbalance appears to be, even in its origins. The principle, though now widely recognized as 80-20, didn't start with that explicit formulation.
No.
Its surprising journey began in the late 19th century with an Italian economist named Vilfredo Pareto.
Yes. Pareto in 1897 was described as a terrific innovator. He wasn't even looking at business efficiency or time management, was he? What was his breakthrough observation?
No, not at all. His initial focus was on the distribution of wealth in Italy. He noticed a predictable, highly unbalanced distribution, a consistent relationship where a small percentage of the population owned a large percentage of the land.
Okay.
While he didn't explicitly use 80-20, his work on income inequality laid the foundational groundwork. He found what he termed a regular logarithmic pattern, which,
Logarithmic pattern. What does that mean in simple terms?
well, simply put, it means the relationship wasn't a simple straight line.
Hmm.
It was one where small increases at the top of the wealth distribution led to significantly outsized gains.
Oh.
It demonstrated that wealth was not evenly distributed among the population, following a consistent, unequal relationship.
And then it wasn't until much later that it gained its more famous name, thanks to Joseph Moses Juran.
That's right. Fast forward to 1951, and Joseph Moses Juran, the great quality guru, truly popularized the concept.
Right, the quality guy.
He made what he alternately called the Pareto principle and the rule of the vital few, synonymous with product quality.
Ah, the vital few. I like that.
Yeah, Duran encouraged businesses to focus on the few defects causing most of the problems, rather than trying to fix every single issue, no matter how minor.
Okay, that makes sense.
This shift in focus from the trivial many to the vital few was a game changer for quality control, particularly in post-war Japan.
So it transitioned from a purely economic observation to a practical tool for improving quality of manufacturing. And from there, corporations started to catch on.
Hmm.
IBM in 1963 is a classic early example. How did they apply this emerging principle?
Absolutely. IBM discovered a crucial fact. 80% of a computer's time is spent executing about 20% of the operating code.
Wow, that's specific.
Yeah. Their immediate and very logical response was to rewrite their operating software to make that crucial 20% highly accessible and user-friendly.
Smart.
This strategic focus made IBM computers significantly more efficient and faster than their competitors' machines for the majority of applications. It was a direct, powerful application of the 80-20 insight.
Showing that focusing on the most used parts of a system yielded disproportionate gains.
Precisely.
And then the personal computing era really amplified this, didn't it?
Yeah.
How did companies like Apple, Lotus, and Microsoft take this principle and run with it for a wider audience?
Oh, they applied the 80-20 principle with even more gusto. Their aim was to make machines cheaper and easier to use for a much wider audience.
Including dummies, as the book puts it.
Exactly. They focused ruthlessly on the core functions that most users would need 80% of the time, making those incredibly intuitive and streamlined while de-emphasizing everything else.
Which made computing accessible and really paved the way for mass adoption.
Mm-hmm.
This brings us to a deeper, more philosophical question.
Yeah.
Why does the 80-20 principle happen? It forces us to shift away from classical linear thinking, which suggests a simple A causes B, B causes C, that the whole is merely the sum of its parts.
Right.
How does Koch reframe our understanding of cause and effect here?
It's a fundamental reorientation. Instead of linear cause and effect, the 80-20 principle views the world as an evolving organism where nonlinear relationships dominate and causes and effects are blurred.
Blurred.
The universe, as the source puts it, is inherently wonky.
Wonky. I like that. It's memorable.
It is. It's about recognizing that things don't always scale proportionally, and small changes can have massive, often unpredictable ripple effects.
It reminds me of chaos theory. How does the principle connect with that idea of underlying order in apparent disorder?
Indeed. This idea ties into what's known as chaos theory. Economist Paul Krugman described it as a self-organizing logic lurking behind the disorder, a predictable nonlinearity.
Predictable nonlinearity.
Which he found spooky, eerie, and terrifyingly exact.
Spooky.
It's like a complex piece of music where themes recur with infinite variety, but not always in an obvious straight line. There's a hidden, powerful mechanism at play.
That's where positive feedback loops come in, explaining how those small initial advantages can lead to hugely disproportionate results, almost like a snowball rolling down a hill.
Precisely. Think of the classic adage, the rich get richer. It's not just about inherent ability, it's that riches themselves beget more riches.
Mm-hmm.
The source uses the vivid example of goldfish in a pond. Even if they start almost the same size, those that are slightly bigger will grow very much bigger.
Why is that?
Because with even minor initial advantages in stronger propulsion and larger mouths, they capture and gobble up disproportionate amounts of food.
Ah, I see.
This creates a positive feedback loop that magnifies the initial difference, making the smaller ones struggle even more.
And this leads us to a fascinating concept called the tipping point. It's incredibly relevant to so many areas of life and business. Can you elaborate on what the book means by a tipping point?
Yeah, the tipping point, originating from epidemic theory, is defined as the point at which an ordinary and stable phenomenon can turn into a public health crisis.
Like an epidemic.
Exactly. Think about an infectious disease. Initially, it struggles to spread. A great deal of effort yields little by way of results. This is often why many pioneers give up too early, right before the breakthrough.
Interesting. They stop just before it takes off.
Precisely. But if that new force, whether it's a product, an idea, or even a disease, persists and manages to cross a certain invisible line, that's the tipping point. Suddenly, a small amount of additional effort can reap huge returns. It's where exponential growth kicks in, where your efforts finally hit critical mass.
We see this everywhere, don't we? Like with products.
Yeah, a product that's only 10% better in the early stages of a market can end up with a 100% or even 200% greater market share, even if rivals later catch up.
Wow.
Or consider something as fundamental as which side of the road we drive on. If 51% of drivers or countries initially decided to drive on the right, that convention would tend to become the norm for nearly 100% of road users.
Locking in that initial slight advantage.
Exactly. The same principle applied to the decision for clocks to go clockwise versus counterclockwise, despite the 24-hour counterclockwise clock on Florence Cathedral. It's the point where a small edge becomes an overwhelming majority.
The source also gives a great example of this with movies, noting that moviegoers behave just like gas particles in random motion, seemingly random, but producing predictably unbalanced results.
hmm Word of mouth from initial reviews and audiences can determine if the second wave of audiences is large or small, and so on.
Which explains why some blockbusters just keep going.
This is why films like Independence Day or Mission Impossible continue to play to packed houses, while other star-studded and expensive movies like Waterworld or Daylight very quickly play to smaller and smaller houses, and then none at all.
Yeah, I remember Waterworld.
This is the 80-20 principle working with a vengeance. A small initial perception of value, amplified through word of mouth, creates wildly disproportionate outcomes. It's not about being slightly better, it's about hitting that tipping point where the small difference becomes magnified exponentially.
So, if the universe is wonky and results are skewed, how does this translate into practical business application? It sounds like it could revolutionize how companies operate. What's the 80-20 theory of the firm?
It absolutely can. The source presents an 80-20 theory of the firm that stands in stark contrast to classical economic theories.
How?
Well, classical economics, with its idea of perfect competition, suggests firms eventually make no excess returns or only a normal cost of capital.
Right, right. That's the standard textbook idea.
But the 80-20 theory is verifiable and helpful as a guide to action because it acknowledges the inherent imbalances that define real-world business. It's a pragmatic theory, not an ideal one.
Okay, so it's grounded in reality.
Yeah.
What are these key tenets of the 80-20 theory for a firm? What does it assert about how businesses actually compete and succeed?
They are quite powerful. First, in any market, some suppliers are simply much better at satisfying customer needs, gaining higher prices and market shares.
Makes sense.
Second, some are better at minimizing expenditure relative to revenue, meaning they are more cost-efficient for equivalent output.
Got it.
Third, these superior firms generate much higher surpluses funds for profit or reinvestment.
Okay.
Fourth, and crucially, over time, 80% of the market will tend to be supplied by 20% or fewer of the suppliers, and these leading firms will also be more profitable.
Wow, 20% or fewer supplying 80% of the market. That's concentrated.
Very. And this principle, the source points out, operates at all levels. Markets, segments, products, customers, departments, and even employees, where 80% of surplus is usually generated by 20% of employees.
Right down to individual people.
Yes, it highlights that apparently small differences create large consequences. For example, a product just 10% better in value than a competitor's can generate a 50% sales difference and a 100% profit difference.
Just 10% better value.
Exactly. The core insight. Success isn't evenly distributed, even among high performers. Small edges compound massively.
That's a mind shift right there. I mean, strategic decisions aren't just about incremental improvements across the board. They're about identifying those disproportionately impactful areas.
Precisely.
This naturally brings us to a new approach to business strategy, something the book calls the underview, which sounds intriguing.
It is. It challenges the idea of grand sweeping overviews in strategy, which often lead to superficial plans.
Like the big 5-year plan that gathers dust.
Kind of, yeah. Instead, strategy should be more like a peek beneath the covers, focusing in great detail on the profitability and cash generation of specific chunks of your business.
Getting granular.
Exactly. Understanding the true drivers of value, not just the surface-level metrics.
And it differentiates between 80-20 analysis and 80-20 thinking.
Mm.
That's an important distinction because not everything has to be a massive data project, but relying purely on intuition can be dangerous.
Indeed. 80/20 analysis is the quantitative and empirical way to measure these relationships. You actually look at the numbers.
Right.
The source provides a fantastic example of a group of 100 friends who are occasional beer drinkers. The analysis showed that 80% of beer consumed by 28% of friends.
So not exactly 80/20, but still very skewed.
Exactly. But it clearly demonstrates the imbalance. This type of analysis requires data collection to reveal the true relationship, which could range from 50/50 to 99.90.1. It's about letting the data tell you where the imbalance truly lies.
And then there's 80/20 thinking, which is faster, but potentially riskier.
Hmm?
How does that differ, and when should a business rely on it?
Right. 80/20 thinking involves deep thought and judgment about whether the principle is at work in a given area without necessarily collecting detailed data.
So using your gut based on experience.
Sort of, yeah. It's faster and more accessible, relying on intuition and experience. However, the book cautions that it can mislead you if you simply assume the 20% without truly understanding it.
Okay.
It's about developing an intuition for disproportionate impact, but ideally, you'd back that up with analysis when possible, especially for big decisions.
Let's get into some specific examples of this deep dive into profitability, because that's where it gets really interesting and practical.
Yeah.
Starting with product profitability.
Okay. The book provides actual data from a study of an Electronic Instruments Inc. This company had product groups that showed exceptionally high returns on sales, some well over 25%,
Pretty good.
while others were making significant losses, even over 20%.
Ouch. Big losses.
Big time. The insight there was stark. Just a minority of their total sales, about 30% from their top product groups, accounted for almost 67% of profits.
So 30% of sales driving 2/3 of the profit, that's a powerful imbalance.
Absolutely.
So the core insight here is that true growth isn't about incremental gains across the board,
Yeah.
but about identifying and relentlessly amplifying disproportionately profitable segments,
Exactly.
allowing you to achieve exponential returns from concentrated effort. What's the biggest shift in mindset needed for a company to embrace this?
It's about being ruthless and counterintuitive. The actionable thought is clear. Reallocating sales effort to double the sales of those top-performing products could raise overall company sales by a modest 20%, but profits would shoot up by over 50%.
Huge leverage.
Huge. Simultaneously, it highlighted the need for radical retrenchment or total exit from the loss-making groups.
Right.
Why invest in what's dragging you down when you have superstars elsewhere?
Right.
The mindset shift is from more is always better to focus on what truly drives value.
And it's not just products. The same analysis applies to customer profitability.
Definitely. Some customers might seem great because they pay high prices, but then you realize they have high service costs. Or big customers might be low cost, but they demand steep price cuts. You need to look deeper.
So for Electronic Instruments, Inc., again, what did the customer data show?
A similar pattern. Their most profitable customer category, while accounting for only 15% of revenues, generated a remarkable 59% of profits.
15% of revenue, 59% of profit.
Wow. Yeah. And looking broader, the top 25% of their customers yielded a remarkable 88% of profits. This shows the profound leverage gain from focusing on a select group of customers.
That's a critical insight. It even leads to tactical wins, like losing the least profitable customers to competitors.
Right.
I love the quote that managers wanted the competitor to enjoy these losses. It's a completely counterintuitive idea for most businesses who think they need every customer.
It absolutely reverses the conventional wisdom of chasing every piece of business. Why hold on to customers who drain your resources and kill your profits? Let someone else deal with them.
Makes perfect sense when you put it that way.
Another compelling illustration comes from a consultancy firm looking at project-type profitability. Here, M&A mergers and acquisitions work was wildly profitable, giving 87% of profits for 22% of revenues.
872 rule there. Very strong.
Very. The actionable thought there, again, was immediate. Redouble efforts on M&A work.
Wow.
And even more interesting, discontinuing operational projects for new clients, which were actually incurring losses.
So stop doing them.
For new clients, yes. For old clients, they'd either charge much more or encourage them to find specialist operational consultancies. It's about ruthless focus on where you truly create value and are uniquely positioned to deliver it.
This leads us to the crucial concept of segmentation, which is presented as the key to truly understanding and driving up profitability. It's about breaking down your business into meaningful competitive segments to reveal where the 80/20 patterns are truly playing out.
Exactly. because the overall picture can hide these crucial differences.
So what exactly is a competitive segment in this context? How do you define it for practical purposes?
It's defined as a part of your business where you face a different competitor or different competitive dynamics.
Okay.
The process of segmentation involves asking two simple but profound questions. Do you face a different main competitor? Or are competitive positions different?
Simple questions, profound implications.
Right. If the answer to either is yes, it's a separate segment and should be analyzed and strategized for distinctly, you wouldn't apply the same strategy to a mature commodity market as you would to a niche high growth one, would you?
No, of course not. And Electronic Instruments, Inc. applied this with remarkable results.
They did. By applying these questions, the firm identified 15 segments categorized by product, geographic region, and in one case, customer type.
15 segments, that's quite granular.
It is, and the analysis showed the top 6 segments, despite comprising only 26.3% of total sales, provided a startling 82.9% of profits.
An 8,326 rule. Again, highly skewed.
This level of detailed segmentation allowed for highly targeted strategies that conventional broad analysis would miss completely.
And the actionable outcomes from this segmentation were incredibly specific and powerful.
They were. First, they concentrated effort on segments 1 to 6, which were not only most profitable, but also attractive markets with strong competitive positions.
Yeah.
Obvious move, maybe.
Right, double down on the winners.
But then, second, they decided to harvest segment 9.
Harvest, what does that mean?
This meant deliberately raising prices and cutting effort on this old technology. Surprisingly, this led to increased profitability from 12.9% to over 20% with little sales loss.
Why?
Because customers were locked into the old technology and didn't have easy alternatives.
Milking the cash cow, essentially.
Kinda, yeah. Third, they de-emphasized segments 10 and 11, which were declining markets with overcapacity. Just managed them for cash, minimal effort. Finally, and this is crucial, they increased effort on segment 13, even though it was currently loss-making due to heavy investment in new entry.
So they invested more in a loss maker.
Yes, because it was a structurally attractive market with high potential to become a scale player and highly profitable within 3 years.
Okay. Strategic investment, not just chasing current profit.
Precisely. This isn't just cutting losses, it's smart, targeted growth, recognizing that not all losses are bad if they lead to future disproportionate gains.
This all really highlights the hidden costs of complexity and the value of simplicity. The book truly hammers home. Simple is beautiful, complex is ugly.
And it makes a compelling case for why. Business has a natural tendency to become over-complex. Things get added, never taken away. The source explains that when new business is different to existing business, even if it is only slightly different, costs tend to go up well ahead of it.
Why does that happen?
This complexity slows down simple systems, demands more management, and creates gaps and miscommunication. Complexity often overrides the benefits of scale. It just clogs everything up.
I can actually visualize this from the source material with a graph showing how competitor B is larger than competitor A, yet has higher costs.
Right.
The explanation is that B's extra volume was bought at the cost of higher complexity,
Right.
overturning the benefits of scale.
Exactly. The power of simplicity is profound. A study of 39 German companies found simplicity was the only characteristic differentiating winners.
The only one.
The only one they could find consistently. They had a narrower product range and fewer customers and suppliers. Pure market share, the source explains, is more valuable than complex diluted share.
Interesting.
Mature, simple parts of business can be amazingly profitable. Outsourcing is also highlighted as a terrific way to cut complexity and costs by focusing on comparative advantage and shedding non-core activities.
Skip to what you're really good at.
And it even suggests abolishing central functions head offices, arguing that this improves profits and empowers frontline staff.
Whoa. Abolish head office. That's radical.
It is, but the argument is that often these functions add more cost and bureaucracy than value. Apparently, most neglected areas are the most profitable because they are left alone and less burdened by bureaucracy.
Fascinating.
Simplicity, it argues, brings businesses closer to the customer, which surprisingly helps raise prices as well as lower costs.
This brings us to a common management fallacy, the contribution to overhead argument. Managers often resist cutting unprofitable business because it contributes to overheads.
Ah, yes, the classic excuse.
It sounds logical, right? But the book calls it out.
It definitely sounds like a common excuse, and the book challenges this, arguing it's a lamest and most self-serving defense mechanism.
Ouch, what's the counterargument here?
Exactly. It explains that profitable segments can actually grow so rapidly that the need for overhead coverage from unprofitable areas quickly disappears. The growth from the good stuff swamps the supposed contribution from the bad stuff.
So focus on growing the profitable parts.
Right. The message is to be ruthless. Remove overhead associated with the unprofitable parts, sell or close those segments, or harvest them.
That harvesting idea again.
Yeah, harvesting means deliberately losing market share, cutting support, raising prices, and allowing sales to decline while profits, paradoxically, rise. It's about extracting value from declining areas rather than trying to salvage them, freeing up resources for the vital few.
So applying these 80-20 insights to cost reduction seems like a huge opportunity. How does the book suggest we approach it?
It is. All effective cost reduction techniques, the source states, use three 80-20 insights: simplification, eliminating unprofitable activity, focus on a few key drivers, and comparison of performance.
Okay.
And critically, you must be selective because cost reduction is an expensive business. It takes time and effort.
Right, it's not free.
So identify the 20% of areas with the greatest potential and then focus 80% of your effort there. Don't try to trim fat everywhere. Target the biggest problem areas.
Focus the cost-cutting effort itself. Makes sense.
The idea of major time sinks is particularly relatable, targeting the 80% of time delays and costs and processes.
Yeah?
The Pacific Bell example is striking. 25% of the work in their customer payment center was devoted to processing just 0.1% of payments.
Quarter the work for almost zero payments?
And a third of payments were processed twice. Incredible waste.
That's staggering inefficiency.
It truly is. And in a publisher's example, out of 15 problems causing typesetting overruns, 3 caused nearly 80% of the overruns.
3 problems causing 80% of the issue.
Right. This reinforces the need to focus on the vital few problems that are responsible for the vast majority of issues. It also suggests to compare performance, forcing laggards to improve to the level of the best 20% or retire gracefully. It's about identifying the biggest levers and pulling them hard.
Turning to marketing and sales, the 80-20 marketing gospel seems to advocate for a hyper-focused approach. What are the golden rules for marketing from this perspective?
It does. It argues that firms should be centered on a small minority of existing markets and customers. There are 3 golden rules.
Okay.
First, marketing and the whole firm should focus on providing a stunning product and service in 20% of the existing product line that generates 80% of profits.
Focus on the star products.
Second, devote extraordinary endeavor towards delighting, keeping forever, and expanding the sales to the 20% of customers who provide 80% of sales or profits.
Delight the best customers.
And third, successful marketing needs a different product or service offering much better value for target customers, typically found in that critical 20% of product lines.
So differentiate where it matters most.
Exactly. The core insight is, don't chase every customer or product. Identify and serve your best ones exceptionally well.
So it's about being customer-centered, but for the few right customers, not all of them. Could you give some examples of this in action?
Exactly. The source cites a telecoms example. 80% of the revenue comes from 20% of the customers. Basic, but powerful. In contract management, it advises. Keep in closest contact with the 20% of your clients who give you 80% of your business.
Makes sense. Nurture the core.
American Express, for instance, runs campaigns to strengthen its franchise with high-volume merchants, recognizing the bulk of your business comes from 20% of your market.
They know who butters their bread.
Right. Even MS Broadcasting focused on its core audiences to increase listening time from 12 hours a week to 25 hours a week, doubling down on the loyal listeners.
Instead of trying to reach everyone a little bit.
Exactly. The message is clear. Identify your most valuable customers and build obsessive loyalty with them.
And the book gives 4 concrete steps to lock in these core customers. What are they?
Okay, first, you need to know who they are. Seems obvious, but really know them. For mass markets, understand their profile deeply.
Step 1. Identify.
Step 2. Provide quite exceptional or even outrageous service to them. Go above and beyond what they expect. Really wow them.
Outrageous service. I like that.
Step 3. Aim to keep core customers forever. Losing them means the business is crumbling beneath your feet. Loyalty is paramount.
Keep them forever. High bar.
And step 4. This focus on the key. 20% of customers must be a company-wide obsession. It's not a department's job, it's everyone's responsibility.
Culture, not just tactics.
Exactly.
And for optimizing Salesforce performance, it's about channeling effort, not just encouraging more activity.
Right. It suggests focusing sales efforts on the 20% of products that generate 80% of sales.
Okay.
Rewarding salespeople for selling the most profitable products, not just the easiest or highest volume.
Align incentives with profit.
And insisting salespeople spend 80% of their time on the best 20% of customers. Actively manage their time allocation.
Don't let them waste time on low-value accounts.
Precisely. It also emphasizes leveraging existing relationships, noting that an old, satisfied customer is very likely to buy from you again, much easier than finding new ones.
Yeah, acquisition is expensive.
The source shares an anecdote about Bill Bain, founder of Bain & Company, who started by selling Bibles door-to-door, and Nicholas Barsan's real estate success, both by returning to old clients.
So go back to the well.
It's about deepening existing high-value relationships because those are far more lucrative than constantly chasing new low-value ones.
The 80-20 principle applies to internal operations too, like decision-making, inventory, and project management. For decision-taking, there's the 80-20, 100, and 100 rule. That sounds like a powerful formula.
It's quite punchy. That rule states, gather 80% of the data and perform 80% of the relevant analyses in the first 20% of the time available.
Okay, get most of the info quickly.
Then make a decision 100% of the time and act decisively as if you are 100% confident that the decision is right.
Act decisively, even with 80% of the data.
Yes. The key is decisiveness, even with the imperfect information. Analysis paralysis is the enemy.
Right.
If it's not working, change your mind early rather than late. Don't stick stubbornly to a bad decision.
Be prepared to pivot.
And crucially, when something is working well, double and redouble your bets, just like successful venture capitalists do.
Pour fuel on the fire when it's working.
Exactly. It's about rapid, informed action and scaling what works.
For inventory management, it's about acknowledging that most businesses have far too much stock.
Yes. Often due to too many products or variants, often referred to as SKUs or stock keeping units. Just too much stuff. The principle holds that around 80% of stock only accounts for 20% of volume or revenues. So most of your inventory isn't selling much.
Ties up cash, takes up space.
Exactly. Slow-moving stock is expensive. The Filofax example is perfect. Their product line expanded uncontrollably to include obscure Corunhide binders and specialist inserts.
Corunhide. Never heard of it.
Me neither. It led to a huge overhang of worthless stock. Their solution was to radically cut unprofitable products and variants.
Get lean.
Practically, this means cutting slow movers, maybe exporting inventory management to suppliers or customers, and strategically locating fast-moving items for efficiency.
And for project management, it's about simplifying the objective.
Yeah. A project, the source notes, is often several projects bundled together. Simplifying the objective helps to focus. Cut the scope to the essentials.
Focus on the core goal.
It also recommends impose stretch targets, like demanding a prototype in 4 weeks or a pilot in 3 months, to force the team to apply the 80-20 principle and deliver the 20% that yields 80% of the benefit.
Use time pressure to force prioritization.
Exactly. And paradoxically, for complex projects, plan before you act. Spending more time on thorough planning leads to better outcomes. Focus on critical issues, form hypotheses, and then act. Don't just jump into execution without thinking.
Plan the work the plan.
Something like that, yeah.
Finally, negotiations, where you can apparently use the 80-20 principle to your advantage. I'm listening.
Oh, absolutely. The advice is kind of cunning, actually. Build up a long list of spurious concerns and requirements early. Make them seem important.
Throw up some smoke.
Kind of. Then concede them late in exchange for the really important 20% that accounts for 80% of the cost or value. Trade the fluff for the substance.
Over.
It also highlights that 80% of the concessions will occur in the last 20% of the time available.
Right near the deadline.
Exactly. Which means impatient people are poor negotiators. You need to hold your nerve.
Patience is key.
Orton Skinner's advice for a pay raise is a perfect illustration. Pace yourself, expecting the critical moments like the boss's impending 10:10 a.m. meeting to be around 9:50 a.m. That's when the real negotiation happens.
Wait for the pressure point.
It's about timing, focus, and understanding that most of the give and take happens when time is running out.
Okay, this principle isn't just for boardrooms and balance sheets. It promises a time revolution in our personal lives. Work less, earn, and enjoy more. That's a pretty compelling offer.
It is, isn't it? And the book positions it as a path to freedom. Being free through 80/20 thinking is described as pragmatic and internally generated, free from external views and societal expectations.
Doing your own thing,
Not so
basically.
much. It's also profoundly hedonistic. It believes life is meant to be enjoyed and that achievement is a byproduct of interest, joy, and the desire for future happiness.
Achievement follows enjoyment, not the other way around.
That's the idea. This challenges conventional traps, like spending time with people you dislike or staying in unenthusiastic jobs just because you feel you should.
Things we tolerate because we think we have to.
Exactly. And it also insists on progress.
Progress in our personal lives.
Yes. Despite centuries of philosophical debate, the 80/20 principle applies the idea of progress to the quality of our own lives. It's strategic in that it advocates concentrating on important objectives where you have a comparative advantage.
Playing to your strengths.
Mm-hmm. And crucially, it's nonlinear, rejecting simple cause and effect thinking. It posits that nothing is inevitable, nothing is ever in equilibrium or unchangeable.
So you're not stuck.
Exactly. This means you have far more agency over your life than you might think. You can change things.
So what are some of the key insights for personal achievement and happiness that come out of this 80/20 lens?
A powerful one is the idea that 80% of achievement and happiness takes place in 20% of our time.
Most good stuff happens in short bursts.
Kind of. The profound insight here is that these peaks of high value can be greatly expanded. You can have more of those high value moments.
Make the 20% bigger.
Exactly. Similarly, a few events or decisions profoundly affect our lives. The goal is to identify these key inputs and actively exert influence over them rather than letting life just happen. Be intentional about the big stuff.
It's about focusing on what you are hugely more productive at. I think many of us get caught doing things we're just okay at.
Absolutely. We fill time with low-value tasks. The book says you can be a winner by choosing the right competition, the right team, and the right methods.
Choose your battles.
Right. Most of our failures, the book argues, are in races for which others enter us. Things we didn't really choose or aren't suited for.
That rings true.
Furthermore, most people spend most of their time on activities that are of low value. The 80/20 thinker, by escaping this trap, achieves much more.
By cutting out the fluff.
Yeah. The choice of allies is also highlighted as critical. Most people, the source suggests, don't choose them carefully enough, and at all. Surround yourself with the right people. And finally, money can easily be multiplied through investment, and this can be used to create a better lifestyle, and happiness itself is something to cultivate and work at.
Happiness isn't just luck.
No, it's not predestined. We can change our temperament by changing our thoughts and habits, emphasizing emotional intelligence. It's a skill.
This sounds like a complete time revolution. The idea of working less, living more is very appealing, but it challenges a lot of our ingrained beliefs about time management. What's wrong with conventional time management, according to Koch?
It directly challenges conventional time management. Traditional approaches often assume we know what's a good use of time and that time is scarce. Get more done, be efficient.
Right, squeeze more into the day.
The 80/20 view, however, focuses on the quality of time, not just the quantity. It suggests dissociating effort and reward.
Breaking that link.
Yes, arguing that the Protestant work ethic, hard work equals virtue, is often inefficient. Hard work leads to low returns. Insight and doing what we ourselves want lead to high returns.
Work smarter, not just harder, but really meaning it.
Exactly. It's about effectiveness, not just effort.
And it gives us some productive laziness patrons to emulate. I find this idea incredibly liberating.
Yes, Ronald Reagan and Warren Buffett are cited as examples. Reagan, for his effortless progression, where never was so much achieved by so few with so little effort.
Effortless progression.
And Warren Buffett, who became incredibly wealthy, not by working but by investing, buying few stocks and holding them for ages, with an investment philosophy that borders on lethargy.
Lethargy leading to billions.
Their success, the book argues, wasn't about relentless grind, but about strategic, highly leveraged effort, focused in action almost.
So it was about pursuing productive passion, like Michelangelo, whose prodigious, sexually driven, sublime output was driven by love for creation, not just a job.
Right. Finding what truly engages you at a deep level. And self-direction is key. The 20% who achieve the most either work for themselves or behave as if they do.
Taking ownership.
Yes. You need to choose partners and obligations extremely selectively. The book also advocates being unconventional and eccentric with your time.
Don't just follow the crowd.
Definitely not. You're unlikely to spend the most valuable 20% of your time in being a good soldier or doing what's expected. It's about carving out the space to do what uniquely leverages your abilities and passions.
The examples of William Ewart Gladstone, the four-time British Prime Minister, are fantastic.
They really are. He was effective at them because he spent his time pretty much as he pleased. Traveling, going to the theater, reading 20,000 books, making long speeches, and resting when ill.
He didn't conform to a rigid schedule.
Not at all. His enormous political energy derived from his eccentric use of time. He protected his high-value activities fiercely.
Like reading 20,000 books.
And the book gives equally striking examples of eccentric management consultants like Randy, who ran a thriving office largely from home, attending only the most important meetings and having few priorities.
Ran an office with few priorities.
By focusing ruthlessly on the vital few, presumably. Or Jim, an oasis of calm inactivity, who methodically worked out high-value tasks and made everyone repeat instructions multiple times to ensure clarity.
The slow, methodical approach.
These individuals, despite their unconventional approaches, were spectacularly successful because they applied the 80-20 principle to their own time and energy. They figured out what worked for them.
So it's about being ruthless in identifying and eliminating low-value activities. That sounds like the hardest part for most people, saying no.
Absolutely. The book lists top 10 low-value uses of time. Things others want you to do, things always done this way, things you're not good at, things you don't enjoy, interrupted tasks, and so on. Stuff that drains you.
Yeah, that list sounds familiar.
The advice is to be ruthless in cutting out these activities. Say no, or treat the matter with a complete ignore. Just don't do them.
Easier said than done sometimes.
True. Conversely, you must identify and expand high-value activities, like the top 10 highest-value uses of time. Things you love, things you're excellent at, things for core customers, things that energize you and produce results.
Focus on the good stuff.
It encourages identifying your happiness islands, times of disproportionate happiness and unhappiness islands, to understand what works and what to avoid. Map your own emotional landscape.
Happiness islands. I like that visual.
The ultimate goal is to increase time on high-value activities from 20% to 100%, even if it means changing career or lifestyle. A radical shift towards what matters.
This sounds like a deliberate cultivation of happiness, not just something that happens to you. What are the daily habits and shortcuts the book suggests?
It begins by noting 2 core ways to be happier. Identify the times when you are happiest and expand them. Identify the times when you are least happy and reduce them. Simple, but powerful.
Expand the good, reduce the bad.
Exactly. This involves consciously avoiding situations that lead to unhappiness. The book then outlines the 7 daily happiness habits, which are surprisingly practical.
Okay, let's hear them.
1, exercise. Releases endorphins. Should be planned, ideally before work. Get it done. 2, mental stimulation. Engaging your mind with something challenging or new. Keep learning.
Right.
3, spiritual artistic stimulation meditation. Concerts, art, nature, reading a poem, anything that feeds the imagination or spirit for at least half an hour.
Feed the soul.
4, doing a good turn, helping others, which provides a deep sense of satisfaction.
Connection.
5, taking a pleasure break with a friend. Social connection and joy. Don't isolate yourself. 6, giving yourself a treat. Indulging in small pleasures, simple rewards.
Okay.
And 7, congratulating yourself. Acknowledging your success in cultivating happiness and progress. Positive self-talk.
Those seem doable.
Yeah.
7 shortcuts to a happy life. These seem like bigger picture strategies.
They are. These are more foundational. 1, maximize control over your life. Lack of control is identified as a root cause of unease. Seek agency wherever possible.
Take charge.
2, set attainable goals. Not too easy, not too tough. Err on the side of soft goals. There's a trade-off between achievement and happiness. Always choosing happiness.
Happiness over achievement.
Interesting.
3, be flexible. Adaptability is key in a wonky world. Roll with the punches. 4, have a close relationship with your partner. Choose a happy one if you have the choice, and nurture it fiercely. It's a huge factor.
Do relationships matter?
5, have a few happy friends. Quality over quantity in social relationships provides greater returns. Choose positive people.
Okay.
6, have a few close professional alliances, critical for achievement and leverage in your career. Build your network wisely.
Got it.
And 7, evolve your ideal lifestyle. Continually refine your life to maximize joy and productivity rather than settling for the default. Keep adjusting. So it's about consciously shaping your environment for maximum happiness and effectiveness. This also flows into crafting your career for 80-20 returns, which relates to the idea of a winner-take-all society. What does Koch mean by this?
Yes, the source points out that in many professions, top earners, often less than 20% of professionals, take over 80% of rewards. The stars get a disproportionate share,
Like actors, athletes?
and lawyers, executives. It cites Steven Spielberg, Joseph Jamil, a trial lawyer who earned $90 million, and even Lady Thatcher's memoir sales disproportionately exceeding those of her ministers.
Big gaps between the top and everyone else.
Exactly. This trend is becoming more pronounced, and the book views it as increasingly meritocratic, reflecting disproportionate value creation, fairly or unfairly.
And to succeed in this landscape, specialization is absolutely key.
Crucial. The advice is to specialize in a very small niche, develop a core skill. Know one thing exceptionally well. Become the go-to person.
Find your niche.
Choose a niche you enjoy, where you can excel and stand a chance of becoming an acknowledged leader. This requires enthusiasm and passion. You can't fake it long-term.
Gotta love it.
Ultimately, knowledge is power. You need to know more about an area than anybody else does, and then marketize that knowledge. Turn expertise into value.
Okay.
Identify your market and core customers, the people who would pay for your knowledge or services, and serve them best. Know who you're helping.
This all sounds like a strategy for being intelligent and lazy, finding your leverage.
That's the essence. Focus on where 20% of effort gives 80% of returns. If you're constantly struggling, pushing uphill all the time,
Yeah.
you're either in the wrong job or doing it completely the wrong way. Something needs to change.
A bit blunt.
It is. It encourages learning from the best, studying what leaders do differently, work for the best firms and the best individuals within them, learn from the masters.
Like an apprenticeship.
Sort of. I recall my own experience early in my career moving from a company like Shell, where success often meant writing long, detailed memos, to Mars, where I quickly learned that true impact came from face-to-face conversations and building relationships, a clear 80-20 shift in effective communication for me.
Interesting personal example. And it strongly advocates leveraging other people. How does that fit into the 80-20 model for personal success?
Yes. Employ as many net value creators as possible. A minority of employees, the book argues, add significantly more value than they cost. Find the stars.
The 20% of employees who create 80% of the value.
Right. It provides a numerical example. If you are 5x more effective than average, and you hire 10 employees who are 3x effective, even paying them 50% more, your total surplus or profit multiplies significantly. Leverage multiplies your impact.
Makes mathematical sense.
The principle extends to outsourcing everything that you and your colleagues are not several times better at doing, freeing up time for high-value activities. Delegate or outsource the rest.
Focus your genius.
It's about concentrating your genius where it matters most and offloading the rest.
And finally, a section on money, money, money. Multiplying wealth with the 80-20 principle. Because money, it turns out, also obeys 80-20.
Indeed. Pareto's original discovery was in wealth distribution, which is highly unbalanced. And the book argues the majority of wealth is created from investment rather than income.
Investing beats earning long term.
That's the idea. And the power of compounding is highlighted as the core engine of wealth creation. Time is your friend.
Einstein called it the eighth render.
Right. The source gives an example. 100 pounds compounded at 5% over 10 years yields 629. But at 40%, it yields $28,925.
Huge difference from the rate of return.
A seemingly small difference in return over time creates vastly different outcomes, mirroring the 80-20 effect. Small inputs, big outputs over time.
And Koch provides 10 commandments of investment. What are the core tenets that sum up his investment philosophy? Seems like a lot to cover.
They are practical and deeply rooted in the 80-20 idea. Let's run through them quickly.
Investment philosophy reflects personality. Know yourself.
Be proactive and unbalanced. Few bets, high conviction. Don't over-diversify into mediocrity.
Concentrated portfolio.
3. Invest mainly in the stock market. Historically, it offers the best long-term returns. And Scheiber's 5K to 22 MLM story is used as evidence.
Long-term stocks.
4. Invest for the long term. Think 10, 20, 30, 50 years. Patience.
Invest most when the market is low. Use price earnings, PE ratio, as a guide. Over 17 is danger. Under 12 is buy signal, roughly. Be contrarian.
Buy low. Use PE.
6. If you can't beat the market, track it. Use low-cost index funds. Simple and effective for many.
Build investments on your expertise. Invest in what you know, your industry, hobby, local area. Use your edge.
Stick to your circle of competence.
8, consider emerging markets. Faster growth, lower PE sometimes, higher risk, higher potential reward.
Call your loss makers. Sell rigorously if a share falls 15% from purchase price. Cut losses quickly. Don't fall in love with the stock.
Strict stop loss.
And 10. Run your gains. Don't cut winners too early. 80% of the gains will usually come from 20% of the investments. Let superstars run. Maybe use a trailing stop loss, like selling if it falls 15% from its recent high.
Let winners run, cut losers short. Classic advice.
Exactly. Ultimately, Kant's investment philosophy is about ruthless selectivity and patience, recognizing that a tiny fraction of your portfolio will deliver the vast majority of your returns, mirroring the 80-20 principle in wealth creation.
So we've covered personal life and business, but the 80-20 principle also has profound implications for society as a whole. It's presented not just as descriptive, but as prescriptive. It points towards a path for improvement.
Exactly. The principle observes a failure to reach anything like an optimal state of affairs, and it points the way to great improvements. It's not just saying, this is how it is.
It's saying it could be better.
Right. It argues that imbalance, while prevalent, is neither inevitable nor desirable. It's a tool for positive change, not just an observation about how things are.
This challenges some of the common doom and gloom scenarios we hear about, like the idea of a 20.80 society, where globalization leads to rampant inequality and mass unemployment.
The idea that only 20% will have good jobs.
Right, with the bottom 80% left behind. How does Richard Coate rebut those fears?
Richard Koch offers a strong rebuttal. He argues that progress is not a problem. Historically, industrial progress has always led to higher living standards and increased employment, not mass joblessness.
So technology creates more jobs than it destroys, eventually.
That's the historical pattern, yes. While managerial unemployment may rise as companies streamline, new jobs will emerge in smaller companies, personal businesses, and unmarketized services. New sectors arise.
Okay.
Society can also consciously shift people to useful things in the social sector if commercial markets don't absorb everyone. He sees it as an opportunity for societal redesign, not a disaster.
And regarding inequality itself, he argues that markets reflect value well, and the solution is not to suppress markets, but to ensure that there is more equal and universal participation in markets by all elements in society. That's a unique perspective.
It is. Don't fight the market, make sure more people can succeed in the market.
Ow.
Well, it leads to fascinating social applications of the 80-20 principle. One is social entrepreneurship, suggesting that everyone should be a capitalist and an entrepreneur by having assets and marketable skills.
Empowering individuals.
Perhaps by selling government property and giving the proceeds to citizens as funds for education or business. It's about empowering individuals to be active participants in the value creation process.
Interesting idea. And education is a prime target for this principle. The book says it's the best place to start. What are the vital few levers for educational improvement?
Indeed. It emphasizes identifying the vital few levers that lead to exceptional results. A Brookings Institute study found that money spent, teacher salaries, and class size didn't matter as much as.
The usual suspects didn't matter.
Not as much as parental control, the clarity of the school's mission, leadership, the school's autonomy, and the freedom and respect enjoyed and earned by the teachers.
So culture, leadership, autonomy matter more than just resources.
That's what this study suggested. These are the 20% that deliver the 80% impact in educational outcomes, according to this view.
And the source highlights proven methods from Dryden and Voss's The Learning Revolution, which demonstrates incredibly accelerated learning techniques. What kind of results are we talking about here?
The examples are astonishing. 11-year-olds in New Zealand catching up 5 years in just 10 weeks with tape-assisted reading.
5 years and 10 weeks.
U.S. Army soldiers learning German 661% better, and foreign language scores improving tenfold with accelerated learning.
Huge gains.
These are super productive methods that leverage the 80-20 principle to unlock phenomenal results, showing that how we learn is far more important than just putting in more hours.
The method is key.
It stresses that structural change, such as decentralization, schools in charge of their destiny, and competition, good schools get larger, bad ones close, are crucial for astonishingly beneficial results.
More school autonomy and choice.
That's the argument presented.
Then there's crime reduction, with the stunning example of New York City in the 1990s.
Yes, a famous case study. Since 1993, New York City has seen a stunning reduction in crime. Police Commissioner William Bratton.
Right, Bratton.
He identified that most crime was committed by a small proportion of offenders and arose from a small number of typical situations. 80/20 again.
Focusing on the few prolific offenders and hotspots.
Exactly. By applying zero tolerance, a massively targeted effort on the minority of offenders and situations that were causing a majority of the problem, crime rates plummeted.
So it wasn't just about more police, but targeted policing.
This is the 80/20 principle applied with the tipping point, where a focused effort on the vital few transformed neighborhoods, concentrated resources on the biggest problems.
And the same thinking can be applied to healthcare. It sounds like there's a huge disconnect between where money is spent and where the biggest health impacts truly lie.
There often is. The U.S. Surgeon General found that only 10% of illness was due to medical care, while 50% was from personal behavior.
Lifestyle choices being half the battle.
Yet, budgets allocated 20 times more to corrective medical care than to prevention. We spend way more on fixing problems than preventing them.
That's a massive imbalance.
Huge. The 80/20 implication is to focus on health education, especially early on, because prevention is cheaper and better than cure.
Shift resources upstream.
Right. This means shifting resources towards more voluntary and home-based health workers, more nutritionists, more gyms, more fitness equipment, more parks, more cycle lanes, and high taxes on unhealthy food. It's about targeting the causes, not just treating the symptoms, making healthy choices easier and unhealthy ones harder.
And the book has some neutral but pointed observations on the role of the state. What's the take there?
Well, reporting neutrally, it notes that state services often see 80% of activity delivering 20% of the value. Bureaucracy and inefficiency can creep in. The 80/20 principle, impartially, encourages unconventional and pragmatic solutions, while it favors ambitious programs of focused social intervention targeting the vital few problems.
Like the crime example.
Right. It remains extremely skeptical about the value of state economic intervention as a service provider, suggesting that the state is generally not as efficient as the private sector in delivering value.
So skeptical of state-run enterprises, but supportive of targeted state interventions.
That seems to be the nuance presented. It prompts a reevaluation of government services through an efficiency and effectiveness lens.
Ultimately, the 80/20 principle paints a picture of progress regained. How does it frame that optimism?
It highlights huge gaps in performance and how poorly we use resources, time, money, energy, personal effort, intelligence. Shows us all the waste.
Which sounds depressing.
But this, paradoxically, is very good news, because it means there's amazing scope for improvement in all aspects of life and society. If we're inefficient, that means there's huge potential to get better.
Ah, the inefficiency represents opportunity.
Exactly. It provides a blueprint for a more effective and happier world if we're willing to apply its sometimes counterintuitive logic. #tag outro.
So we've taken a deep dive into Richard Koch's 80/20 principle, and it's clear it's far more than a simple ratio. It's a profound lens for understanding inherent imbalance and a powerful tool for strategic action, whether you're optimizing a business, managing your investments, or simply trying to live a happier, more productive life.
It challenges our assumptions at every turn, doesn't it? From how we view effort to how we manage our time and even how we structure our societies.
Definitely.
It's about being intelligent with our limited resources, focusing on where the true leverage lies, and recognizing the disproportionate returns are everywhere if you know where to look.
And for our final provocative thought for you to mull over, the 80/20 principle ultimately insists on one powerful idea, that you have far more control over your outcomes than you think.
Yeah, that's a key takeaway, agency.
It's not about working harder, but about thinking differently, ruthlessly identifying that vital few, and then amplifying its power. So we ask you, what is that 20% in your life, your work, or your community that if you truly focused on it, could yield 80% of the results you desire?
Good question for everyone listening.
And what would it take to run to it, surround yourself with it, immerse yourself in it, patent it, make yourself its expert, worshiper, high priest, partner, creator, propagandist, and indispensable ally?
That's quite the call to action.
It is. The secret, it seems, isn't just knowing the principle, but truly embodying it.